Welcome to History Curiosities channel. In this video, I'll be discussing some of the most curious events in history. From strange coincidences to unbelievable feats, these stories will leave you amazed. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. The Rise and Fall of the Mythical Aztec Empire. Part 1. The era in which the Aztec Empire emerged was perhaps the closest thing to an earthly paradise. Any other human civilization would envy it. There was an abundance of food and no plagues. Even with all this, this culture is widely known for the bloody human sacrifices of thousands of individuals. Cannibalism was a ritual they practiced. They were also known for training fearsome warriors who showed great ferocity in combat. They went from being an unknown tribe of hunters to become a powerful city-state capable of conquering and maintaining control over a large part of the Mesoamerican territory. In this video we will explain their origin, culture, politics and economy, how they were built and how the last great pre-Hispanic civilization native to Mesoamerica came to an end. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications to keep up to date with our updates. What does the word Aztec mean? The Aztec term alludes to their mythical and unknown place of astral origin that could mean seat of the herons, white land or primordial place. The truth is that they were never known by that name, no one called them that way. The term Mexico was the one they used to call themselves. They called themselves Mexica in honor of their main god Huitzilopochtli, who was also known as Mexicali. The capital city of their empire was the famous Tenochtitlan, currently Mexico City. It is worth mentioning that it was the emigration of Nahua peoples, such as the Mexica, to the center of Mesoamerica that may have caused the disappearance of the Toltec civilization. Toltec was the previous dominant civilization of the region and from whom the Aztecs would imitate the architecture, mythical origins of the Aztecs. Even today, the place of origin of the Aztec people is still unclear. That is because the ancestral record of their history was burned by one of their kings. Sometime later another king tried to recover the lost information. His efforts were to no avail since the Spaniards ended up destroying what little had been rescued. For this reason, when talking about the Aztec origins, the main part is based on mysticism, and the testimonies left by Spanish priests who had contact with the civilization. It is said that the tribe came from the north of what we know today as Mexico. Its people migrated further and further south, in search of signs and signals from their gods to settle in a promised land. The exact geographic origins of the Aztecs are completely uncertain. This has led to much controversy about their true place of origin. Some historians omit the myth of the city of Aztlan altogether. Instead they propose that the tribe shared origin with other native peoples of mythical Chicamo stock. Others propose that the Aztecs are not truly native to Chicamo stock and that this place was only a temporary settlement on their long pilgrimage. There are other historians who make no distinction between Chicamo stock and Aztlan and affirm that they are the same mythical place. The first migration and settlement of the Aztecs was in the middle of the 13th century. The Mexica arrived in what we know as the Basin of Mexico, and were the last Nahuatl-speaking migrants to reach the center of Mesoamerica. By that time other peoples had already been in the area for some time. They had already claimed most of the land considered good for agriculture. The Mexica were forced to fight against the city-state of Kawaken. They lost the battle, so they had to submit to the will of the supreme chief of Kawaken. The latter allowed them to settle in an unoccupied area in exchange for serving as a mercenary force. After the Mexica served them well in battle, the tribe was allowed freedom to settle in Tizapan. Mexica revenge against Kawaken. The Mexica persuaded the paramount chief to hand over one of his daughters to establish an official friendly bond, and thus make her their queen. The chief accepted and gave one of his daughters to rule the Mexica. According to ancient native stories, by divine orders, the Mexica decided to sacrifice the princess. They offered her heart to the god Xipa-Totec. Then they invited her father, the chief, to the ceremony of reverence. The chief noticed that one of the Mexica priests wore the skin of his sacrificed daughter as a disguise. Some indicate that this was the divine design. It was a revenge against Kawaken. When the chief of Kawaken realized what they had done, he gathered an army and forcibly expelled the Mexica from Tizapan. The tribe would end up fleeing to the interior of Lake Texcoco. Establishment of the Aztecs in the Promised Land. When fleeing from the army, the Mexica ended up entering the Valley of Anahuac. Then, trusting and following the prophecy that would lead them to their rightful settlement, they found a swampy land on the surface of the lake. The myth tells that while there they saw an eagle devouring a snake on top of a cactus. The prophecy they had been waiting for decades had been fulfilled. In the year 1325, the Mexica concluded their nomadic base and settled definitively on the islet of the lagoon. At last they had found a convenient place, naturally protected and unoccupied. In 1375 they renamed the city with the name it is known by, Tenochtitlan. Tenochtitlan was a kind land for agriculture. The Mexica drained the marshy land of the place and erected artificial islands on which they could cultivate. They laid the foundations for what would become one of the most influential city-states in the area, and the heart of a powerful empire. The Aztec agricultural system was relatively sophisticated and included intensive cultivation of the land and very effective irrigation methods known as chinampas. Typical Mexica crops included maize, beans, squash, potatoes, tomatoes and avocado. They also sustained themselves by fishing or hunting local animals such as armadillos, snakes, coyotes and wild turkeys. The First Aztec Alliance. The Mexica decided to ally with the neighboring city-state of Azcapotzalco and began to pay tribute to Tezozomoc, the supreme chief of that city. Thanks to the help of the skilled Mexica warriors, the Tuxpanecas of Azcapotzalco quickly expanded their influence until they became a small tributary empire. Until that time, none of the Mexica rulers had been recognized by the other city-states of the basin as legitimate kings in their own right. Blood relations between rulers was an important aspect of 14th century Mesoamerican politics. Because they were still considered by many to be newcomers, the Mexica were at a political disadvantage. Therefore, in 1375, after the death of the caudillo, the Council of Mexica elders decided to elect a leader. This leader would have to be able to secure the position of their emerging city through blood ties with the powerful peoples of the region. The first Tlatoani representative of the Mexica. Despite the fact that the Mexica had been expelled from Tizapan, a few years earlier marriages had already taken place between the two peoples during their brief period of alliance. It is then that Acamar Pichili, product of one of these unions, was elected as the first Tlatoani representative of the Mexica, in 1376. His father was a famous Mexica leader, while his mother was the daughter of the previous chief. In addition to these ties, the Kawaken nobles claimed to be direct descendants of the ancient Toltecs. This made Acamar Pichili's bloodline even more prestigious. The period between 1376 and 1427 was characterized by the complete submission of the Mexica people to their rulers. The second Huey Tlatoani of the Mexica people and the continuation of alliances. The fourth son of Acamar Pichili would become the second Huey Tlatoani of the Mexica people in 1391. During his reign, relations between Tenochtitlan and Azcapotzalco were further strengthened. The fourth son would take as wife one of the daughters of the Ponica chief. While the Tepanicas continued to expand their dominion with the help of the Mexicas, the city-state of Texcoco gradually increased its power in the easternmost part of the basin. Finally, in 1416, war broke out between Azcapotzalco and Texcoco for supremacy. The Mexica played a vital role in the victory of Azcapotzalco. It seems that Tenochtitlan had already established itself as an influential city-state. A surprising threat to the Aztecs arose. The next successor was the son Ximalpopoca, an 11-year-old boy who barely reigned since he was possibly murdered by his uncle Maxtla. Maxtla, to ensure the throne of Azcapotzalco, also murdered the legitimate heir, his brother. With the death of the chief Tezozomoc and his legitimate heir Maxtla would become the new monarch of the Tepanica. He never hid his disdain for the Mexica, who had to endure humiliations and high taxes. A new Mexica leader and the realization of the Triple Alliance. The Mexica needed a strong leader capable of facing the threat of Maxtla. It is then when the last son of the first Tlatoani was named as the fourth Huey Tlatoani. The Mexica of Tenochtitlan formed a three-way alliance with the Texcocanos of Texcoco and the Cubans of Tlacopan. After assassinating the robber Maxtla, they managed to defeat the Tepanicas in a fulminating way in 1.428. The city of Azcapotzalco would pay the consequences and would become a second-rate city whose market would be poor and mainly of slaves. The alliance formed by these three city-states would be known as the Triple Alliance. So much for the first part of this incredible history of the Aztecs. Thanks for watching. If you found this video interesting, make sure to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. We'll be back soon with more curiosities from history.